Hello and welcome. My name is Saran, and in 2013 I had a right ischemic stroke, which was from a carotid artery dissection. It left me with left side hemiplegia, so I had to learn to walk again, and my arm and hand is probably the most affected. So I can sort of move that now, but it's a ongoing journey. So I'm hoping that by sharing my stories, I can help empower others to live their best life on this stroke journey of theirs. So let's get on with it. So today I thought I would just go back in time a little bit, nearly 10 years this month, and talk about my first 12 months because it was a big one. So I was at home on the 19th of January in 2013. My children were 3, 7 and 9 at the time. We were all at home, which was handy because usually they'd be at sport or dancing or whatever. And I felt fine. Like there was nothing that was sort of, I didn't have any headaches, I didn't feel dizzy or anything like that. I went to my daughter's room and went to push in a drawer, and as I pushed it in, my left arm shook, and so I touched it, and it felt like, when you sleep on your arm and you can't feel it. And I thought, it's weird. And I stood up and my leg went from under me. So I was lucky that opposite my daughter's room was my son's room, and he was in there with my other daughter playing Little Big Planet with his mate. And I remember being able to sort of say, hey, of Hayden. And I'm saying, hey, and that's literally all I could get out. And I could hear his mate say, Hayden, your mum's calling you. And I'm thinking, and it felt like forever, but it wasn't. So he ended up coming in, saw me on the floor, ran out to get David. And my partner is a volunteer AMBO, but was a paramedic back in the day. And so he came in and basically called the ambulance straight away. And we were lucky enough that we live literally probably 10 minutes away from the hospital and from the city. So from the time of them coming in and calling to getting into hospital probably was about 15 minutes. I remember, so I couldn't feel anything at all, and they did the fast symptoms, so they did the face, speech, and then obviously time, which is getting me in as soon as possible. I remember the doctor coming and sort of touching my, like putting a thick pin on my foot, and there was no feeling in it. And I swear he was speaking really loudly. And I couldn't really talk, but I could hear, I could still think the things that I was thinking. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what is happening? And what if I can never speak again? But I can hear all this stuff, and this is what old people must feel like when when they're reaching really, really old age, and it was scary. So they weren't sure if it was a stroke because, of course, I was 38 at the time. But they still needed to, take the precautions anyway. So they did the thrombolysis where they had to try to put blood thinner in. But because of that, there's also a risk of bleeding, and so they had to monitor me for 24 hours. So every half hour, the nurse would sort of try and wake me up and make sure that I was talking and, was conscious, etc. So I remember it was just such a weird feeling because I remember her waking me up, but I also remember just sort of sleeping, and I would wake up thinking, oh my God, this is so good. Like, but obviously I couldn't move at all. It wasn't, so back in 2013, there wasn't a stroke unit, and it took sort of 3 days for the locum or the residents, the doctors to come in and tell me that it was a stroke. So I had CT scans and I had an MRI, but they still couldn't actually find anything for a couple of days. And so then they ended up coming in and just sort of saying, look, you've had a stroke. And I think because we were really hoping that it was going to be a headache and just a migraine, because supposedly migraines can actually, really bad ones can give give stroke symptoms. We were really hoping and wishing for that. So I remember it was just like, oh my God, I remember I cried and my partner was with me, and it was just horrid. During that time, we did have my family come to visit me, so my kids sort of came in. I tried to look as least awful as possible, but I couldn't move or anything like that, and I had like oxygen, and I had needles in me and that kind of thing. So I was, for the first 3 days, obviously I wasn't allowed to get out of bed. So I had a nappy on, yay, and I happened to have my period, which was even better. So, it was just like all, what's the word? Dignity was gone. And they had to come in and they had to change me, and if I needed to go to the toilet, they ended up sort of taking that off, but then if I did need to go to the toilet, they'd use the bedpan, and then they had to shower me, and again they had to shower me. I sort of was just laying there or sitting there. It was awful. So they said that I would be in the hospital for about a month and rehab for about 3 months. But I was like, hey, because for me, my brain was still fine. It was just my body. So no one really taught me that it was a brain injury. So I was thinking, well, no, I feel fine, apart from my body not working. I can get back into this. So no one really taught me about that. No one taught me about fatigue, sensory overload. So I saw it's just the physical deficits, but the invisible deficits, which is the fatigue, the sensory overload, the the brain fog, which are the three huge ones, as well as the depression and the fact that you lose your own identity, was just not spoken about, let alone sexual identity, let alone sort of, actual, all of that kind of stuff, and living your life post-stroke. So I honestly thought that I'd be better after 12 months time. I thought, that's cool, I can start walking again, they can help me to start walking, and I'll get my arm back, and then it'll be all be fine. So I got to the 12 months, and I'd basically been in therapy. So I was at the hospital for a week, 8 days, and ended up being in rehab for 3 weeks, and then outpatient for like 6 weeks or whatever. And it got to the point where they sort of said, okay, well, we've reached the end of our therapy. And I'm like, well, I'm still not walking, and my arm still doesn't work, so actually we're not finished. And the therapists sort of were a bit taken aback, because it was kind of like, oh, wait, sorry. So I got an extension. I was able to, I paid private, and basically said, no, I want to keep going. And so my therapist got to the point where, because they were a rehab hospital, they basically sort of said, look, we aren't trained for any more than what we've done for you. So they managed to sort of get me into the Repat hospital in Adelaide, and I was there as an outpatient, a day rehab, and was doing I think I wasn't doing hydro, I was doing physio, OT, and then exercise physio, all in one hit, sort of like for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Then I'd go home, and I'd do that like 2-3 times a week for like 5 weeks. And again, we get to the end of it, and I'd sort of go, oh, okay. And so I went back there a few times, because basically I said, no, I want to come back. If I have to pay for it, I'll pay for it. And at that time, I didn't know that there was NDIS. I don't think NDIS had actually started way back then. But anyway, I just kept doing things. So I think the biggest thing was that I didn't actually know what sort of therapy I needed. So I just did everything I could. I worked out the therapists that had egos didn't work with me. Like the people that actually saw me for me and sort of went, okay, well, yeah, this is the stuff that you want to do, so we'll work on this, rather than giving me dumb exercises like open the gate, close the gate, which just send me crazy. It's like this trigger thing. It's like, they would say open the gate, close the gate, and with this arm there was literally nothing. And so it's kind of like, well, why am I opening and closing the gate? Not actually telling me the muscles that work and what actually makes them move. They gave me nothing. And so I sort of worked out that I liked therapists who were smart, who actually really had their specialization, and then sort of molded it around what I needed and what I wanted. So I was doing like therapy 4 times a week for the first 12 months. And I must admit, it got to my 12-month anniversary, stroke anniversary, call it what you want. Some people call it a rebirth day, some people call it, just the anniversary of their stroke. But because I think my walking was so much better within sort of 6 months. And I say better, I was walking. So I started off with a wheelchair, and then I was actually walking with a stick, and then I was able to sort of generally walk without one, but there was still risks of fall. So falling, obviously, without two arms, basically you just have to fall, you just have to go with it. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in another video. It was hard to not realize that I wouldn't ever be back to who I was, and I think sometimes education would be a lot better if that was sort of spoken about, or at least you could go back to sort of asking someone a question. And that's where I found Genius Network, which is a trauma survivor network. So people like me, people like you, who've been through trauma, and so we just get it. We don't have to explain that we have a sleep and it's a necessity, not a luxury, and and that kind of thing. And I spoke to people who are further on down the track, so that I could actually sort of see that there was hope. So that I was sort of stuck in this rut, thinking, this is it. Am I, is this it? So I found that was actually really difficult. Now fast forward to nearly 10 years, and I'm still on this journey. I'm still improving. I've just done the VR Les Mills body combat, and I actually broke an hour, which, drama, because I was trying to do it in a small room. Try and do it in a bigger room. But it's good. It gets my heart pumping. I never thought I'd be able to do it. I barely sort of really punch the left, but at least I get movement, and the pain in my shoulder is a lot better because of it. So I will give anything a go, including research, and I found that that's really, really beneficial for me as well. But I feel as though for me, the best thing that has happened, in this whole time, is actually connecting up with other stroke survivors, other trauma survivors, because we've all gone through the same sorts of, trauma, as in loss of identity, loss of who we were, and that question of, well, who am I now? So it's, I think the biggest thing is be kind to yourself. Look at that your small progress, and whilst it sucks and you really wish that you make big jumps and that kind of thing, you're sort of setting yourself up for disappointment. And I've done it many times. Again, easier said than done, but be kind to yourselves. So I hope that you enjoyed this long, convoluted video. I'd love your feedback and love suggestions on perhaps other things that you'd like me to talk about. Nothing is off limits. I'd also love you to like the video and perhaps even subscribe. But for now, see you next time.